The sun, a molten coin, pressed its weight upon the baked earth, bleeding heat into the air that shimmered above the cracked asphalt. Here, at the border patrol station in the desert, the world felt stripped bare, reduced to ochre dust and the relentless, rasping sigh of the wind. You watched it all from the worn plastic chair by the single, grimy window of your cramped office, the silence a heavy shroud around you, broken only by the distant, rhythmic thrum of a generator. Your fingers, calloused and bearing the ghost memory of a wedding band, traced the scarred wood of the desk. Every grain, every gouge, a testament to the passage of time, to the slow erosion of purpose. This outpost, a forgotten speck on the map, was where Marcus Thorne came to fade. Where the grit of the desert wind could scour away the bitter edges of regret, or so you had hoped. Instead, it merely polished them, making them sharper, more defined. A newspaper clipping, its edges frayed and yellowed, lay beneath a chipped ceramic mug. The headline, a stark declaration of tragedy, still burned itself into your mind: investigative journalist found dead, random attack suspected. Beneath it, a grainy photo of a vibrant face, now a ghost on newsprint. Eleanor Vance. Her name, a whisper in the dry air, always brought with it the acrid taste of failure. Her murder, a cold stone in the pit of your stomach, was the case that had twisted your career into an unrecognizable knot, costing you the badge, the respect, and the very ground beneath your feet. You remembered the frantic, fruitless hours, the dead ends, the dismissive shrugs of those above you. A random act of violence, they'd concluded, sealing the file, sealing your fate. The sun dipped lower, painting the horizon in bruised purples and oranges, a fleeting beauty in this desolate expanse. The light caught the dust motes dancing in the air, each particle a tiny, glittering secret. You often wondered what secrets this desert held, how many stories were buried beneath its indifferent surface, just like Eleanor's. A sudden rumble, deeper than the generator, pulled you from your reverie. Headlights cut through the deepening twilight, a distant beacon approaching the station. A vehicle, sleek and out of place against the rugged landscape, pulled to a stop. Its engine purred, a low growl that spoke of power and expense. A shadow detached itself from the driver's side, moving with an unnerving precision. The knock on your door was firm, unhesitating. Not the tentative rap of a lost traveler, nor the familiar greeting of a colleague. The figure stepped inside, bringing with them the scent of expensive cologne and the cool, crisp air of a climate-controlled interior. His eyes, keen and unwavering, took in your disheveled appearance, the Spartan office, the lingering scent of stale coffee and defeat. He was not a colleague, that much was clear. Not from this life, anyway. Marcus Thorne, the stranger stated, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone, more a confirmation than a question. My name is irrelevant. My purpose, however, is not. He held up a slim, leather-bound folder. This is for you. You didn't move, your gaze fixed on the folder, on the implied weight it carried. I'm not in that business anymore, you replied, the words flat, devoid of the fire they once held. He smiled, a thin, humorless curve of his lips. Perhaps not. But some business, Mr. Thorne, has a way of finding its way back to you. Especially when it was never truly finished. He tossed the folder onto your desk. It landed with a soft thud, unsettling the newspaper clipping beneath your mug. Eleanor Vance's face seemed to stare up at you, her eyes accusatory. Your fingers twitched, a phantom itch to open it, to know. You finally met his gaze, a flicker of the old fire igniting deep within your eyes. That case was closed.
dismissed as a random robbery gone wrong. Indeed.
A convenient dismissal, he agreed, his eyes narrowing slightly.
But certain irregularities have recently come to light.
Thorne, that now lead directly
to the current presidential campaign of Senator Caldwell. Caldwell. The name was a thunderclap in the quiet room. A prominent politician, poised on the brink of the nation's highest office.
The implications were staggering, a web of deceit stretching far beyond a single, tragic murder.
When he was just a senator. We believe so.
And we believe her investigation was getting too close to something very significant. Something that could unravel a great deal more than just a campaign, the stranger confirmed, his gaze unwavering. There's a hidden organization at play, Marcus. One that has cultivated power in the elite's highest echelons, and they do not tolerate threats to their meticulously constructed edifice. He gestured to the folder.
Inside, you'll find what we have. Fragments.
But enough, we believe, to reignite the investigation.
Enough to give you the chance to finish what you started. To find the truth you were denied. The truth.
The word resonated deep within you, a forgotten bell suddenly rung.
Redemption.
It was a tempting, dangerous whisper in your ear. But it also meant stepping back into the maelstrom, confronting not just the past, but a present far more treacherous than the one you'd left behind. The desert wind howled outside, a mournful cry that seemed to warn of the storm to come. You looked at the folder, then at the stranger, your jaw tightening.
The choice, stark and unforgiving, was laid before you.
The desert air, a rough caress against your skin, still held the promise of the past chapter's ending.
Redemption. The word, a phantom limb, a forgotten ache, pulsed with a dangerous lure.
The hum of distant generators, the faint scent of diesel and dust, grounded you in a present you barely recognized as your own. The caller, a lean figure in a worn uniform, stepped closer, the desert grit clinging to his boots.
No catch, Marcus. Just a chance. A chance to right a wrong. The original detective. He retired. Said he couldn't shake it. Said something felt off. He offered a heavy, scuffed leather briefcase, its latches glinting dully. These are the files. Everything.
The journalist's murder.
The initial reports. The dead ends.
Your fingers brushed the cold metal of the latches. The weight of the case in your hand was immediate, substantial, like holding a fragment of your own buried history. It was not just paper and ink, it was the echo of a brilliant life extinguished, a career derailed, a truth obscured. The offer hung in the air, thick with the scent of old paper and the unspoken promise of a path back from the wilderness.
Where do I start, you asked, the words surprising even yourself.
The question was not an acceptance of the offer so much as an acknowledgement of the inevitable pull. The quiet desperation for answers, for anything to fill the hollow space within you, was a tide too strong to fight. Start with the old reports, the caller advised, his gaze unwavering.
Look for what was missed.
What was dismissed. He gestured vaguely towards a small, unoccupied office tucked away from the main bustle of the station.
You can use that. It's quiet. You nodded, the briefcase a familiar burden now.
You walked towards the designated space, the fluorescent lights humming above, casting a sterile glow on the beige walls. The office was sparse, a metal desk, a hard chair, a single window overlooking the sun-baked expanse.
Unlatching it, the scent of aged paper, of forgotten details and stale coffee, wafted up.
Inside, folders lay stacked, thick and imposing. Photographs, crime scene diagrams, witness statements, forensic reports, a mosaic of a life abruptly ended.
You pulled out the top folder, its label neatly typed, case file, Anna Reed, homicide. Anna Reed.
An investigative journalist, they had called her.
Brilliant.
Her murder, initially categorized as a random act of violence, a robbery gone wrong in a seedy urban alley, had been the first domino to fall in your own professional collapse.
You remembered the initial investigation, the frustrating dead ends, the pressure to close the
case, the gnawing feeling that something crucial was just out of reach. The initial police report detailed the discovery of the body, the lack of immediate suspects, the superficial evidence pointing to a street-level mugging. But as you delved deeper, a discordant note began to resonate. The vendor had described a specific, almost imperceptible, emblem on the car's rear panel, a stylized crest, he'd called it, like a coiled serpent or a knotted rope. At the time, it had been attributed to a faulty memory, a trick of the dim light. You had seen that emblem before, not on a street corner, but in the glossy pages of a political magazine. It was the subtly integrated logo of a private security firm, Cerberus Holdings, frequently mentioned in connection with the current presidential campaign of Senator Elias Vance.
Vance, the prominent politician whose rising star now overshadowed the political landscape.
You flipped through to the forensic report.
No forced entry into her apartment.
No signs of struggle, beyond the fatal blow. Her expensive camera, laptop, and a small, encrypted data drive were missing. Valuables, yes, but the data drive.
That was the key. He had been working on something big. Something dangerous.
Further down, buried in the supplemental reports, was a printout of an email fragment, recovered from a cached file on her desktop.
You remembered that name.
The random act narrative began to unravel like a cheap suit. Anna Reed hadn't been a random victim, he had been targeted. Her death wasn't a street crime, it was an execution, meticulously disguised. The truth, once buried under layers of official neglect and convenient explanations, was beginning to surface, sharp and unforgiving. The connections, subtle at first, then glaring, converged on a nexus of political power and an unseen hand pulling strings from the highest echelons. A dangerous game, indeed, and you, Marcus Thorne, were now back in play.
The alley still clung to the ghosts of city grime and forgotten rain.
You stood amidst the lingering sense of stale refuse and damp concrete, the narrow canyon of brick and shadow unchanged, yet utterly transformed by the weight of memory. Here, in the indifferent sprawl of urban decay, Anna Reed had drawn her last breath. You remember the stark silhouette of her body against the grimy wall, the chalk outline a brutal calligraphy of absence. It was a scene etched into your conscience, a cold case that became a branding iron on your career. The initial report, a swift, dismissive narrative of random violence, felt like a lie even then, a convenient fiction swallowed whole by a system eager to close books. Every rust-stained drainpipe, every chipped window frame, seemed to hold a secret, a silent accusation. Your next stop was the precinct, a place you hadn't stepped foot in since the brass stripped you of your shield. You found the records clerk, a man whose face had grown heavier with the years, his eyes now holding a perpetual wariness. He sat hunched over a flickering monitor, a fortress of files around him. "Marcus," he grunted, not looking up, his voice a gravelly murmur.
"Thought you were long gone."
"Just tying up loose ends, a personal inquiry," you replied, your voice steady, though a tremor of resentment ran beneath it.
"Anna Reed's case. Deep. Closed."
He pushed a hand through his thinning hair. "You stir that pot, you're not just dealing with ghosts.
Some things are better left undisturbed." His tone was flat, but the underlying current was unmistakable, a warning. "You owe me that much."
He sighed, a long, weary sound, then gestured vaguely towards a shelf of dusty binders. "They're all in there, somewhere. Don't expect miracles.
And don't say I didn't tell you to walk away."
Hours later, the fluorescent hum of the records room buzzed in your ears. You thumbed through the brittle pages of the evidence log from Anna Reed's case, each item a fragment of her final moments.
Most were mundane: wallet, keys, cell phone, notebook.
Then, a line caught your eye, dismissed with a cursory note, small. Intricately carved wooden bird, found clutched in victim's right hand.
Believed to be a souvenir. A souvenir. You remembered it.
At the time, it had seemed insignificant, a desperate clutch in a final struggle. But Anna Reed was meticulous.
She wasn't one for random trinkets.
You remembered the feeling of that bird in your gloved palm, the faint, almost imperceptible ridges on its underside. You had dismissed it too, in the chaos of the initial investigation.
Now, the image flared, sharp and clear.
You recalled a detail from the initial processing: the bird had been sent to the lab, then returned, deemed irrelevant. You remembered the lab tech mentioning a faint, almost invisible inscription, dismissed as tool marks or natural grain irregularities.
But Anna. She left nothing to chance. A quiet certainty solidified within you. This wasn't a random souvenir. This was a message. A clue.
A single, blurred photo from the evidence file showed the bird, slightly enlarged. You squinted at the image, then pulled out your phone, zooming in further. Not letters, not numbers, but a sequence of geometric shapes: a triangle, a circle, a square, a star, a wavy line, two parallel lines, and a dot. It was a cipher, deliberate and precise. You spent the next few hours cross-referencing, digging through Anna's old articles, her personal notes, anything that might hint at a code. Then, a forgotten footnote in an old piece on indigenous land rights, a brief mention of a local desert tribe's ancient symbols used in their navigation and storytelling. And suddenly, the shapes clicked into place. A place far from the city's concrete canyons. A place in the vast, silent expanse of the desert. It wasn't just a random spot, it was a nexus, a point of control and concealment. Anna, the relentless truth-seeker, had been drawn there. The drive was long, the landscape slowly shedding the urban sprawl for a stark, magnificent desolation. The sun beat down, baking the asphalt, the air shimmering above the endless road. You felt a growing sense of isolation, but also a fierce determination. The further you drove from the city's familiar dangers, the more exposed you felt, yet the closer you felt to the truth. Barbed wire fences glinted in the sun, and a single, dusty flag whipped in the hot wind. It was a place of quiet authority, a sentinel outpost in the vast emptiness. You presented your old, expired badge, the plastic cool against your palm. The patrol officer at the gate, a young woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper jawline, eyed it suspiciously. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, his voice clipped, his hand hovering near his sidearm.
"Marcus Thorne. I'm here about an old inquiry, related to a journalist, Anna Reed. I believe she may have visited this station some years ago." Her gaze hardened. "No record of anyone by that name visiting here. We log all civilian interactions."
She paused, her eyes narrowing. "And your badge is expired. Any information, however small, could be crucial." A figure emerged from the main building, a man with the bearing of command, his uniform crisp despite the dust.
"Everything all right, officer?"
"Sir, this gentleman is asking about an old case, a journalist, Anna Reed. His credentials are
outdated." The commander's eyes, the color of flint, settled on you.
"Anna Reed," he repeated, the name a stone in his mouth. "No, I recall no such journalist here.
Our records are thorough.
And we certainly don't discuss ongoing operations or past inquiries with unauthorized civilians." His tone was devoid of emotion, yet it carried an undeniable weight, a veiled threat wrapped in bureaucratic protocol. "I suggest you take your questions elsewhere, Mr. Thorne.
This station deals with current threats, not ancient history." The words hung in the hot, still air. Anna had been here.
He had found something. And whatever it was, these powerful forces wanted it to stay buried beneath the desert sands, forgotten like so many tracks in the wind. You stood by the grimy pane, the heat of the sun-baked glass radiating against your palm, a stark contrast to the chill that had settled deep in your bones. The officer's words, a blunt instrument, had carved a new, sharper edge into your resolve.
Anna had been here.
Her ghost, a shimmering mirage, seemed to dance in the shimmering air outside, just beyond the barbed wire. A veteran agent, his face a roadmap of sun and worry, had offered you a stale cup of coffee and a moment of quiet in a small, utilitarian office. You pulled out the crumpled notes, the hastily photocopied pages from Anna's apartment, the ones you'd almost overlooked in your initial, desperate search. They felt heavier now, imbued with a new, dangerous significance. Your gaze drifted over the meticulous script, Anna's elegant hand-tracing patterns of numbers and names. Most of it was still a jumble, a mosaic missing its grout. But then, a recurring phrase began to prickle at your awareness: Cerberus Holdings, Project Chimera. It was underlined multiple times, almost violently, in the margins of a financial report detailing land acquisitions in the very region you now inhabited. You remembered Cerberus. A corporate behemoth, its tendrils reaching into energy, infrastructure, and security. Always just beyond the grasp of true public scrutiny, a phantom limb of power and Project Chimera? The name itself was a warning. The politician, then a rising star in regional development, had championed a series of land reforms and infrastructure projects precisely where Cerberus Holdings had made significant, often opaque, investments. You saw it now, a faint but undeniable thread. Anna wasn't just investigating a politician, he was dissecting the symbiotic relationship between political ambition and corporate might. Her research hadn't been about a random act, it had been a surgical strike at the heart of a hydra. This wasn't merely a connection, it was a blueprint. The politician's current presidential campaign, a carefully constructed edifice of public trust, rested on foundations laid by Cerberus. And Anna had found the cracks. The veteran agent, clearing his throat, broke your concentration. "Anything useful, Thorne?" he asked, his voice low, almost a murmur.
You looked at him, searching for something, anything, in his weary eyes. He seemed genuinely concerned, or perhaps just curious. Just putting pieces together, you replied, your voice rough. You needed to leave, to find a place where you could truly unravel this, away from the watchful, if well-meaning, eyes of the station. The desert, for all its vastness, felt suddenly too small, too exposed. Your old sedan, a faithful metallic beast, shimmered in the heat. The air, still thick with dust, tasted of iron and impending storm. You slid behind the wheel, the worn leather hot against your skin, and started the engine. The roar was a familiar comfort, a promise of motion. You drove, the station shrinking in your rearview mirror, a lone beacon swallowed by the encroaching twilight. The road, a ribbon of asphalt unspooling into the endless expanse, stretched before you. Then, a sudden, violent lurch. A deafening bang ripped through the quiet of the desert evening, a sound that vibrated through the very chassis of your car. The steering wheel bucked in your hands, pulling sharply to the right. The sedan swerved, tires screaming against the gravel shoulder, spitting up a rooster tail of dust and rock. You fought for control, your muscles tensing, years of defensive driving kicking in, instinct taking over. The world outside became a blur of sand and sky, threatening to capsize. You wrestled the wheel, correcting the oversteer, feeling the heavy thud of the tires as they found purchase again, barely. The car fishtailed, then straightened, shuddering violently. Your breath hitched in your throat, a raw gasp. You slowed, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against your ribs, and pulled over, the engine ticking nervously. You were alive. You were intact. But the passenger side front tire was shredded, a gaping wound in its rubber skin. It wasn't a blowout. The ragged edge of the tear, the deep gouge in the rim, spoke of something sharp, deliberate. Nothing. Just the endless, indifferent desert. But you felt eyes on you, a predatory gaze from the vast emptiness. This wasn't an accident. This was a message, etched in shattered rubber and the near loss of control. They knew you were digging. They knew you were close. And they wanted you to stop. The metallic taste of fear mingled with the grim resolve that now hardened your jaw. The game had just turned deadly. Among them, a fragmented data dump from the murdered journalist's recovered laptop, a ghost in the machine, resurrected. Your fingers danced across the keyboard, a familiar rhythm of search queries, sifting through the digital detritus of a life brutally cut short. The journalist's notes were a labyrinth of names, dates, and cryptic observations. You chased every thread, every half-formed thought, every breadcrumb trail laid by a mind too keen, too persistent for its own good. The screen glowed, illuminating the tension etched around your eyes, the faint tremor in your jaw. Then, a fragment. An old, encrypted communication log, buried deep within a folder labeled Project Atlas. Your breath hitched. Atlas. You remembered the briefing, the stern faces, the official narrative that painted it as a low-priority intelligence-gathering operation, nothing more. Not Atlas, but Chimera. Another ghost, this one more personal, more painful. A classified project you'd briefly touched upon during your early years, an initiative shrouded in such secrecy that even its existence was denied by the highest echelons. You had stumbled upon a minor anomaly related to it, an unusual expenditure, a discrepancy in a logistics report. You remembered his words, calm and reassuring, yet laced with an undeniable authority. Marcus, That's classified. Above your pay grade. Focus on the street-level narcotics. That's where you make a real difference.
He had gently, but firmly, steered you away, told you to drop it, to trust his judgment, and you had. You had been young, eager, and utterly trusting. You had let it go, convinced it was just a bureaucratic oddity, too complex for a junior detective to unravel, too sensitive to pursue. That decision, that act of deference, had sent you down a different path, away from the true currents of power. Now, years later, the murdered journalist's digital ghost was screaming its relevance. The journalist wasn't just investigating Atlas, they were digging into Chimera, the project your mentor had subtly, skillfully diverted you from. The project you had dismissed as irrelevant. The project that now, you realized, held the very key to the journalist's death and perhaps your own downfall. They were familiar, sickeningly so. An abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city you once called home, a place you had driven past countless times, never suspecting its hidden life. A place the journalist had evidently been tracking. The commander. He was more than a mentor, he was a friend, a confidant, a man you had admired, a man who had offered you a quiet word of support even after your public disgrace. He was now a prominent voice in the current administration, a key figure in the very political circles the central mystery now orbited. A bitter taste filled your mouth. The trust you had placed in him, the respect you had held, now curdled into a corrosive suspicion. Had he merely been protecting classified information, or had he been actively, deliberately, misleading you? Had your past failure, the one that had stripped you of your badge and reputation, been carefully orchestrated, or at least facilitated, by the very man who had once championed your potential? The screen blurred for a moment, the words swimming before your eyes. The betrayal, if it was indeed betrayal, wasn't just a professional slight, it was a personal wound, deep and festering. It meant the foundation of your career, the very bedrock of your understanding of justice, had been compromised by someone you considered family. And you, Marcus, had been led away from the truth, blindfolded by a trusted hand. The name, Chimera, still clawed at the walls of your mind, a forgotten beast stirring from a long slumber. Not Atlas, no. That was a red herring, a decoy for minds too weary to dig deeper. Chimera. The word hummed with a dark resonance, a project whispered in hushed tones during your earliest days, a phantom limb of the intelligence world. Its existence was a rumor, its purpose a chilling enigma. Yet, here you were, chasing its ghost through the desiccated veins of the desert, guided by a half-remembered fragment of information, a decommissioned outpost, once a staging ground for clandestine operations, now a forgotten annex of the Border Patrol. It clung to your clothes, gritted between your teeth, and settled on the worn linoleum floor. The fluorescent lights hummed with a weary drone, casting a sickly yellow glow over the rows of metal filing cabinets and the slumped figures of patrol agents hunched over flickering screens. You moved through the main office, a phantom yourself, your gaze sweeping past the mundane, seeking the obscure. He'd pointed a calloused finger towards a door at the far end of the facility, a door marked only with a faded storage sign. Everything from before '98 is in there. Good luck. The storage room was a mausoleum of forgotten bureaucracy. Boxes stacked precariously high, their labels faded into illegibility, lined the walls like silent sentinels. The scent of aged paper and dry rot filled your nostrils, a testament to decades of neglect. You began your methodical excavation, a solitary archaeologist sifting through the detritus of lost time. Each box you opened was a gamble, a rustle of dusty folders, a cascade of forgotten reports. Your fingers, calloused from years of gripping evidence in cold steel, moved with a practiced rhythm, sifting, scanning, dismissing. Hours bled into a timeless haze. Your eyes ached, tracing lines of forgotten data, reports on smuggling routes, outdated personnel files, budgets for equipment long since obsolete. The air grew heavier, thick with the weight of unanswered questions. Doubt, a persistent viper, began to coil around your resolve. Had you misremembered? Was this just another dead end, another ghost hunt leading to nothing but more dust? Then, in a box tucked away behind a leaning stack of decommissioned radio equipment, something caught your eye. Not a file, but a binder. It felt different in your hands, heavier, denser, as if holding secrets physically. You pulled it free, the ancient cardboard groaning in protest. The typeface was old, monospaced, like something from an early mainframe printout. And there it was, on the third page, a header in bold, stark letters, Project Chimera, Operational Overview. Your breath hitched. The air in the room, already thin, seemed to vanish. This was it. The beast. You devoured the pages, your eyes racing across the dense text. It wasn't a surveillance program, not exactly. It was an influence operation. A table on page 7 listed key personnel and stakeholders. Your gaze locked onto the names. Code names first, then, beside them, in smaller, almost apologetic print, the real identities. Your finger trembled as it traced down the list. But the true gut punch came on page 12, under a section titled Threat Assessment and Containment Protocols. A specific entry, dated years ago, stood out like a freshly open-wound target, investigative journalist's name. Status, critical threat, exposure imminent. Recommendation, immediate containment protocol, final stage. The words blurred. Final stage. It wasn't a random act. It was an execution. The journalist hadn't merely stumbled upon Chimera, they were on the verge of exposing its architect, the politician, and his network. You hadn't been wrong, you'd been outmaneuvered, outgunned, and ultimately, betrayed by the system you swore to uphold. A wave of nausea washed over you, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. The dust, the stale air, the weary hum of the lights, it all faded into a background drone. Only the words on the page existed, burning themselves into your mind. It was a live wire, sizzling with danger and a terrible, beautiful truth. The personal cost, once a nagging fear, now solidified into an immutable certainty. Your badge was gone, your reputation in tatters, your life already fragmented. What more could they take? Nothing. You had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain, justice. Not just for the journalist, but for the integrity of the truth itself, for every innocent life crushed beneath the machinations of power. The weight of the evidence was immense, a heavy anchor dropped into the churning waters of your purpose. You would see this through. To the bitter end, if necessary. The desert wind howled faintly outside, a mournful cry that mirrored the storm now brewing within you. The fight had truly begun. The words final stage still echo, a chilling anthem in the hollow chamber of your mind. It wasn't a random act. It was an execution. A cold, calculated elimination. You taste the metallic tang of fear, not for yourself, but for the fragile truth you now cradle.
The implications ripple outwards, threatening to drown you. They know you're close. The air hums with an unspoken urgency, a predator's breath hot on your neck. Your burner phone, a relic from a life you thought you'd left behind, screams with an incoming alert. A news bulletin, terse and brutal, flickers across the tiny screen. Former Detective Marcus Thorne, wanted for questioning in connection with a recent security breach and the disappearance of classified intelligence. The carefully crafted lie unfurls, swift and insidious. They aren't just pursuing you, they're framing you, painting you as the very villain you hunt. A fugitive. The word settles heavy, a shroud. Your old badge, long since surrendered, feels like a phantom weight against your chest. Every passing vehicle, every distant siren, sharpens the edge of paranoia. You make the call, a desperate gamble. Anything on the journalist's final movements. Anything out of the ordinary, particularly south of the border. A sigh, heavy with reluctance. They're putting out feelers for you, Marcus. High level. They're calling you a ghost, a loose end. Then move like one, you urge. This isn't just about me. A final failsafe. Vanish. A fitting stage for a final act. The journalist had a source, a low-level agent within that very station, feeding them fragments of information about illicit cross-border movements, not just people, but resources, bypassing official channels, vanishing into the vast, indifferent landscape. Each mile pushes you deeper into the sun-scorched expanse, the air growing thick with dust and the scent of creosote. The sun beats down, a relentless hammer, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage. You navigate by instinct, by the faint memory of old maps, by a growing sense of urgency that gnaws at your gut. A black sedan, sleek and incongruous against the desolate backdrop, appears in your rearview mirror. You push the accelerator, the old engine groaning in protest. The pursuit is subtle, professional, designed to unnerve, to box you in, to make you crack. You take a sudden, jarring turn onto a dirt track, kicking up a plume of ochre dust, hoping to lose them in the blinding cloud. The sedan hesitates, then follows, its headlights piercing the swirling grit. You drive harder, faster, the landscape a blur of skeletal saguaros and jagged rock formations. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, but offers no reprieve. The black sedan is still there, a persistent phantom. You remember a narrow canyon pass, a treacherous shortcut known only to locals and those desperate enough to risk it. You swerve, sending the vehicle careening over loose gravel, the tires fighting for purchase. The sedan behind you slows, its drivers perhaps less willing to tempt fate. You gain precious moments, enough to disappear into the rapidly deepening twilight. It's a low-slung building, stark and utilitarian, a defiant outpost against the encroaching wilderness. The air is cool now, carrying the faint, earthy scent of dust and distant rain. You park the sedan a quarter-mile away, hidden behind a cluster of mesquite trees, and approach on foot, moving like a wraith. The station hums with a quiet, watchful energy. A lone agent stands guard near the main entrance, his silhouette sharp against the artificial light. Your target isn't the main building. The padlock is rusted, but a well-placed kick sends it clattering to the ground. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of dust and disuse. Rows of grimy, empty lockers line the walls. You move systematically, your fingers tracing the cold metal, searching for anything out of place. It's the fifth locker from the end, its handle slightly bent,
a faint scratch mark near the hinge.
You pry it open, the screech of metal echoing in the silent shed.
Inside, nestled beneath a pile of ancient, moth-eaten uniforms, you find it, a small, waterproof pouch.
Your fingers tremble as you unfasten the clasp. It contains 2 items. The second, a single, faded photograph. The image on the photograph burns itself into your vision, a handshake.
They stand near a remote desert airstrip, the politician in a tailored suit, the other in rough work clothes. In the background, partially obscured, are crates awaiting transport. On one, stark and undeniable, is the symbol of Chimera, a stylized bird of prey with razor-sharp talons.
This isn't just a link, it's a direct pipeline.
The politician, the architect of Chimera, using the very borders he vows to protect to smuggle, to build his network, to consolidate his power. The journalist had been right. They were uncovering the mechanism of the conspiracy. A sudden, jarring crunch of gravel outside. The beam of a flashlight cuts through the gloom of the shed. You freeze, the photograph clutched in your hand, the data stick digging into your palm. They found you. The net is tightening, its threads woven by powerful, unseen hands. You are closer than ever to the truth, but the truth, you realize, has a brutal, unforgiving price. The desert swallows the last blush of twilight, painting the sky in bruised purples and indifferent grays. The air, still holding the day's furnace breath, now carries the faint, metallic scent of ozone and the distant whine of a generator. This place, a crucible of quiet surveillance, hums with untold secrets, and you are here to pry them loose. Your gaze drifts over the perimeter, a silent calculation. The low-level agent, the journalist's whisperer, would have had a routine, a blind spot, a place of sanctuary for their carefully hoarded truths. The previous chapter's ghost words echo, illicit cross-border movements, not just people, but resources, bypassing official C. This station, meant to uphold the law, was complicit in its fracture. A service entrance, less guarded, tucked behind a cluster of utility sheds, becomes your silent invitation. The lock, a standard issue, yields to your practiced touch, a whisper of metal against metal in the profound quiet. The air tastes of dust and old coffee, a forgotten world within these walls. You move with the predatory grace of a phantom, each step measured, each breath controlled. The journalist's notes, fragmented but precise, guide you. The agent was a records clerk, a keeper of the mundane, but with eyes that saw beyond the surface. Their cubicle, tucked away in the sprawling administrative wing, is your target. The cubicle is a tomb of forgotten tasks. A wilting plant, a stack of untouched forms, a faint impression where a keyboard once sat. Your fingers trace the edges of the desk, searching for an anomaly, a hidden compartment, a sign of something deliberately concealed. Beneath the false bottom of a worn plastic pen holder, a tiny, unassuming data drive rests, cool and smooth against your skin. This is it. This is the heart of the labyrinth. Back in the relative anonymity of your vehicle, miles from the station, the desert wind buffeting the chassis, you connect the drive. A stream of encrypted files unfurls across the screen, a language of betrayal and power. Financial ledgers scroll by, disguised as campaign donations, but the pattern, the sheer volume, speaks of something far more sinister. Your eyes narrow, deciphering coded entries, Project Chimera, Desert Bloom Initiative. These are not benign names. Then, a series of internal memos, timestamped just days before the journalist's murder. They detail the precise coordinates of remote landing strips, drone flight paths, and clandestine rendezvous points, all for the movement of special cargo. Not people, not drugs, but advanced surveillance technology, high-grade components for an illicit network of data interception. Resources, indeed. Resources for control. A specific name leaps from the digital page, a codename you've heard whispered in the hushed corners of power, a moniker linked to the politician's inner circle, the architect. But as you scroll further, a chilling revelation blossoms from the text, a direct order, signed not by the architect, by the politician themselves, authorizing the expedited transit of a critical shipment, coinciding precisely with the journalist's final days of investigation. The signature is undeniable, a bold, looping declaration of authority. The journalist had been on the verge of exposing this technological coup, the erosion of privacy, the weaponization of data against the very populace the politician claimed to serve. Their death wasn't a random act of violence, it was a surgical strike against a truth-teller. The pieces click into place with a horrifying finality. The motive, the means, the mastermind, all laid bare. You possess the undeniable proof, the smoking gun that links the politician directly to the illicit network and, by extension, to the journalist's demise. But holding the truth is not enough, you must wield it. You craft a message, concise and cutting, an anonymous whisper into the digital ether. It contains a single, irrefutable snippet from the drive, a coded reference to Project Chimera and a specific, damning date from the politician's signed memo. The message is simple: the desert holds its secrets, but some bloom in the light. Your harvest is due. You send it to a burner email, an address you know is monitored by the politician's security detail, ensuring it reaches the intended target. This is your gauntlet thrown, a direct challenge. You know the politician will not allow this evidence to surface. They will move. They will come for you. This is not just a confrontation, it is an invitation to a trap, and you are walking into it with open eyes, the weight of justice a heavy, burning ember in your chest. The stage is set. The desert wind outside howls, a prelude to the storm. Your hand, calloused from years of gripping steel, brushes the cold, worn grip of the pistol tucked against your spine. This is it. The culmination of whispered fears and unearthed truths. Headlights cut through the deepening gloom, two beams dissecting the vastness, growing brighter, sharper. Then, from the rear passenger door, steps the leader. Not the politician himself, but the architect of his ascent, the quiet force behind the curtain, whose eyes, even from this distance, hold the glint of polished stone. Marcus Thorne, his voice, surprisingly soft yet resonant, carries across the short distance, always the dramatic entrance, aren't you? You step forward, letting the harsh artificial light from the station's interior illuminate your face. The grim set of your jaw. I prefer to call it showing up, you reply, your own voice a low growl. Thorne. Where the strings are pulled without the messy inconvenience of public scrutiny. He gestures to the silent station behind him. You truly believe this desolate outpost will be your stage for revelation? It's as good a place as any to expose a lie, you counter, your gaze unwavering. The lie of a righteous politician, the lie of a random death, the lie that justice is blind. Not bought. Two more. Enforcers, silent and imposing, emerge from the SUV, positioning themselves to flank the leader. Their hands are empty, but the bulge beneath their jackets speaks volumes. You are outnumbered, outgunned, but the fire in your gut burns hotter than any fear.
You speak of lies, the leader says, taking a slow, deliberate step towards you, but your entire career was built on a crumbling foundation of them. A disgraced detective, grasping at straws, trying to rewrite history. History has a way of repeating itself, you retort, especially when the same hands are pulling the levers. They were close, too close, to uncovering the funding behind the politicians' early campaigns. The untraceable offshore accounts, the illicit transfers, the donations from shell corporations linked to your organization. You watch his eyes, searching for a flicker, a tell. Wild conjecture. I have more than conjecture, you press, your voice rising, cutting through the desert stillness. I have the ledger. The one the journalist secured, hidden in a dead drop, detailing every transaction, every name, every date. It paints a clear picture. The politician wasn't just complicit, he was a willing beneficiary. He knew the source of his power, and he sanctioned the silencing of anyone who threatened it. The leader's smile finally falters, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. A subtle shift in his posture, a tightening around his eyes. A ledger? A convenient fiction, I imagine. Not fiction. Fact, you state, pulling a small, encrypted data chip from your pocket, holding it up. This chip contains a full digital copy, cross-referenced with bank statements, encrypted emails, and even a confession. Not a direct one, but a meticulously recorded conversation between the politician and a trusted aide, discussing containment of the journalist, just days before the murder. The enforcers stiffen. The hulking driver's hand drops to his side, a clear signal. You see, you continue, pressing your advantage, the journalist wasn't killed for what they knew, but for who they were about to expose. Not just your organization, but the politician himself, revealed as a puppet, dancing to your tune. The random act was a professional hit, executed with surgical precision to look like a botched robbery. The timing, the location, the staged struggle, all designed to misdirect. But the details, the small, almost imperceptible errors, they accumulated. The specific type of ligature mark, the lack of forced entry on the journalist's apartment door, the missing hard drive that was never reported stolen. You were sloppy. This chip isn't just a copy. It's a key. A dead man's switch. If I don't make contact within the next hour, if this chip isn't manually deactivated by me, its contents, along with a pre-recorded statement from me detailing everything, will be released to every major news outlet, every investigative journalist, every government oversight committee. Anonymously, untraceably. The leader stares at you, his eyes calculating, weighing the impossible odds. He knows you're not bluffing. The desperation in your voice, the conviction in your stance, it's all too real. You've chosen a dangerous game, Thorne, he finally says, his voice devoid of its earlier softness, now sharp as broken glass. It's a game you started, you reply, when you decided a life was worth less than a secret. And now, the clock is ticking. The hulking driver takes another step, his hand moving with sudden, terrifying speed. You anticipate it, your own hand flashing to your back, drawing the pistol. The desert air shatters with the sharp crack of a gunshot. Not yours. A warning, perhaps, from one of the enforcers. The truth is out, or at least, on the verge of being so. The desert night, once indifferent, now holds its breath, waiting for the final act. The desert night, which moments ago had held its breath, now exhales a long, slow sigh,
carrying the scent of creosote and spent adrenaline. You stand your ground, the pistol a cold, familiar weight in your palm, the chip a tiny, potent shard of truth clutched in your other hand. Before you, sprawled in the dust near a idling, sand-dusted vehicle, is the operative. Not dead, but stunned, a silent testament to the sharp crack of your pistol but against their temple, a precise, calculated strike that avoided ultimate finality. The silence is vast, broken only by the distant hum of the desert wind and the faint, approaching growl of engines. You had anticipated this. Your call, made minutes before the confrontation, was a gamble on an old contact, a thread of trust woven years ago. Now, that thread tightens. Headlights slice through the pre-dawn gloom, 2 sets, then 3, painting the sparse landscape in stark, moving relief. They converge on your position, their beams catching the glint of the pistol, the inert figure, and your unyielding posture. The vehicles, marked with the insignia of the Border Patrol, grind to a halt. Doors open, and agents spill out, their movements precise, their weapons raised. Drop the weapon, Thorne. Hands where I can see them. The voice, deep and authoritative, belongs to the station chief, a grizzled man whose eyes, even in the dim light, hold a weary respect. Slowly, deliberately, you lower the pistol, placing it gently on the sand, then raise your hands, the chip still a secret in your left fist. He was trying to cross, you state, your voice raspy, with this. You open your palm, revealing the minuscule, gleaming chip. The chief approaches, his gaze sweeping from the operative to you, then to the chip. He nods, a curt, almost imperceptible gesture. We got the alert. Good work, Thorne. He doesn't ask for details, not yet. He knows. He always knew, or suspected, the deeper currents flowing beneath the desert's surface. 2 agents moved to secure the operative, their movements practiced, professional. Another takes the pistol, carefully bagging it. You are led to one of the patrol vehicles, not cuffed, but ushered with a quiet firmness that speaks of procedure and an unspoken understanding. The station itself is a utilitarian structure of concrete and corrugated metal, stark against the emerging palette of a desert sunrise. They take the chip. A federal agent, introduced only as the analyst, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, receives it from your hand as if it were spun glass. She disappears into a secured room, the click of the lock echoing in the quiet corridor. Hours blur into a sequence of quiet interrogations. You recount the journey, the discovery, the final, desperate confrontation. The questions are meticulous, probing the gaps, the logic, the intent. You answer with a clarity born of exhaustion and conviction. The chief listens, occasionally interjecting, but mostly observing, his gaze steady, assessing. Then, the first tremors begin. A television screen, mounted high in the station's common area, flickers to life, usually reserved for weather reports or border alerts. Now, a news anchor's grave face fills the frame. The audio is low, a murmur that slowly grows into a collective hush as agents gather. Unprecedented revelations tonight, shaking the very foundations of the upcoming presidential election. Sources close to federal investigators confirm the existence of a highly encrypted data chip, recovered earlier this morning near the southern border. This chip, believed to contain irrefutable evidence, implicates a prominent political figure and several high-ranking individuals in a vast network of corruption, influence peddling, and the cover-up of a decade-old murder of an investigative journalist. The words hang in the air, tangible, heavy. You watch, detached, as the news cycle begins its ravenous feast. The anchor speaks of a disgraced former detective who played a pivotal role in the discovery, a fleeting mention that carries the ghost of your past. The event you engineered has detonated. The reveal is now unfolding across every screen, every headline. Not the ache of failure, but the peculiar emptiness that follows a long, arduous climb to a summit where the air is thin and the view, though expansive, is stark. The politician's campaign, once a juggernaut, is already crumbling. Public outrage, swift and brutal, ignites comments sections and social media feeds. The analyst emerges from the secured room, her expression grim, but with a flicker of satisfaction. She holds up a small, sealed bag containing the chip. It's all there, Thorne. More than we even hoped for. Names, dates, encrypted communications. The whole damn web. Her voice is quiet, but the weight of her words is immense. You nod, accepting the confirmation, the vindication. But the triumph is not the joyous burst you might have imagined. It's a quiet, internal tremor, a faint echo in a vast, silent chamber. The redemption you sought is here, in the unfolding chaos on the screen, in the secured evidence, in the apprehension of the operative. But its personal cost is beginning to sink in. The years of isolation, the burning obsession, the friends lost, the careers sacrificed, they are not erased. They are simply part of the landscape you now inhabit. The chief approaches, a mug of coffee in his hand. He looks at you, his eyes holding a complex mix of admiration and pity. You did it, Thorne, he says, his voice low. You opened the floodgates. But remember, he adds, his gaze drifting to the television screen, where the anchor's voice continues its relentless report, when the floodgates open, the water goes everywhere. And sometimes, you're the one left standing in the deluge. You look out the window, at the desert sun, now fully risen, painting the horizon in hues of fire and ash. The truth is out. But the world, still reeling from its impact, has yet to fully comprehend the depth of the storm you have unleashed. Your journey for justice has ended. Your reckoning with its aftermath has just begun. The truth, a tempest long brewing in the shadows, has finally broken upon the world. Its initial impact, a shockwave rippling through the corridors of power, has begun to settle, leaving behind a landscape irrevocably altered. And you, Marcus Thorne, stand at the heart of it, a solitary figure watching the dust of a collapsed empire slowly drift away. The hum of distant communications, the muted clatter of keyboards from a nearby office, are the only sounds that dare to intrude upon your thoughts. You remember the weight of the badge, the crisp uniform, the unwavering belief in a system that ultimately failed you. That failure, a specter that haunted your every waking moment, had driven you into the desert, into a self-imposed exile where the only company was the ghosts of your past. Now, those specters have been confronted, dragged into the harsh light of day, and for the first time in what feels like an eternity, they seem to recede. The image of the journalist, vibrant and relentless, flickers in your mind. Her murder, a cold case that had festered for years, dismissed as a random act of violence, was the seed from which the sprawling conspiracy had grown. You had seen the threads then, nascent and fragile, but the system, blinded by its own ambition and corruption, had refused to follow them. It took a decade, a lifetime of regret, and a chance at a new beginning to finally pull those threads taut, unraveling a tapestry of deceit that reached into the highest echelons. The politician, once untouchable, his presidential campaign a juggernaut of calculated charisma, is now a name synonymous with scandal. The evidence you meticulously gathered, the testimony you painstakingly extracted, the connections you painstakingly traced, all have culminated in a downfall as public as it was deserved. Not fully dismantled, perhaps, for such deeply rooted rot takes more than a single storm to clear, but their operations are crippled, their secrecy shattered. The world now knows the faces behind the masks, the names whispered in the dark now shouted in the light. A colleague, his face etched with fatigue, walks past, offering a curt nod. You return it, a silent acknowledgement of shared burdens, of a battle fought and, for now, won. The path to this moment was fraught with peril, each step a gamble. You had risked everything, your freedom, your life, the fragile peace you had found in anonymity. But the alternative, to let the truth remain buried, to let injustice prevail, was a price you could no longer afford to pay. You traced the outline of a mountain peak with your finger on the windowpane. Redemption. It's a word often thrown around, a concept that feels too grand, too definitive for the messy reality of life. Perhaps it's not a destination, but a journey. And this journey, this relentless pursuit of the truth, has brought you to a place where the weight on your shoulders feels lighter, where the air in your lungs doesn't carry the constant ache of failure. You have not erased the past, but you have confronted it, armed with a fierce determination that had been rekindled by the memory of a journalist's unanswered questions. The fight is far from over. The legal battles will be long, the resistance from those who still cling to power fierce. But the foundation has been laid. The cracks in the edifice of corruption are visible, and the seeds of doubt have been sown in the public consciousness. You have played your part, a crucial, defining part. The ghosts of your past, the mournful echoes of what might have been, finally feel at peace. You turn from the window, the harsh light of the desert sun now fully illuminating the room. Your eyes sweep across the faces of the federal agents, the border patrol personnel, the few remaining witnesses and investigators. There's a palpable sense of exhaustion, but also a quiet resolve. What comes next, you do not know. The badge is still gone, your old life a distant memory. But the purpose, the unwavering commitment to justice, has been reforged in the fires of this investigation. The path ahead is uncertain, a winding road through unfamiliar terrain, much like the desert outside this station. But you are no longer lost. You carry the weight of experience, the scars of battle, but also the clarity of a mission accomplished. You have found a measure of peace, not in forgetting, but in confronting. And as you step away from the window, towards the unknown future, you walk with a quiet strength, a renewed sense of self, Marcus Thorne, no longer defined by failure, but by the relentless pursuit of truth.